I was gonna make you rich, and you've just become more trouble than you're worth. Well, you wanna tell me what made you a criminal?
What made you a criminal?
Nothing made me a criminal. I am a criminal.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. Before I tell you about my guest this week, I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who came out last Saturday to the Crooked Crab Brewery for the live recording of the Check Your Balances podcast. It was a great time. The room was packed. Ross Anderson and Dan Maseka put together a great event. And if you missed it, you can just listen on their latest episode of the podcast. There were some fun moments, some great questions from the audience, which is always a roll of the dice. I've done a few events like that in the past, and when you open it up to questions from the audience, that can go a few different ways. And this was great. So thank you to Dan and Ross, and also to the people I met who not only listened to Check Your Balances, but also listened to this show as well. So thank you to John and Curtis and Eric and Sean. It was great talking with you guys. It was time well spent. Speaking of time well spent, today on the show, I talk with Alison Fragale. She is a behavioral scientist and author of the best-selling book, Likeable Badass. And to describe the book, I'm just going to go with the reviewer from the Financial Times who wrote, "This book is for anyone who wants to know the secrets of getting ahead without being a self-promoter or a hard ass, someone who no one respects or likes. Likeable Badass is a genuinely original and useful book." It is. And Alison is smart and dynamic and holds nothing back. And we do get into some of the insights from her book. It was a really fun conversation. So let's get into it with Alison Fragale. You grew up in Pittsburgh, do I have that right?
I grew up in Pittsburgh, yep.
What is the first memory you have of money?
The first memory I have of money is my dad talking to me about how he didn't grow up with money and how much that affected how many decisions he made in life. And by the time he told me that when he grew up, he didn't eat in a restaurant that had a tablecloth on it till he was 17 years old, when he got taken out to dinner as a payment for cleaning his neighbor's garage. And that his goal in life was to make enough money that he could eat whatever he wanted. My dad is a person who can consume a high volume of food. He could eat whatever he wanted without having to worry about how much it cost. And he took great pride that when we went to the grocery store, if I wanted something in the grocery store, he was like, you could have that. And you could tell that he felt proud that he could do that. And I think that memory is a couple of things. One, anytime I spend whatever I want on food, I could still think of him in that way. But it also affected a lot of the choices I made as I was growing up to think about money as a primary marker or goal that one needed to make sure they achieved in their adult life, and governed a lot of decisions that I made that in some ways took me longer to get to where I am now that has me talking to you, because I couldn't figure out how to monetize the things that I'm now doing when I was younger, and that narrative kind of stuck.
How do you think that affected him as he got older? Because, it can go any number of ways for people who grew up poor.
I think it made him both, one, really willing to spend money on himself and things that he cared about. So to this day, my father will spend an ungodly amount of money on a meal. If I said, hey, Dad, do you want to fly halfway around the world to eat dinner? And dinner's going to cost $5,000. He says yes. But you know what he won't do? He will not get his own Amazon Prime account. He still insists on using mine, even though I continue to get the notification text in the middle of our workday. My dad's like, I need batteries. So it's made him really think about being incredibly willing to spend money on things that matter, and incredibly, tight on things that maybe matter a little bit less. I think it's made him generally quite generous with people. He's run companies for his whole life in terms of thinking about taking care of people and thinking about money matters to people. So it's made him think about how they would think about their, financial return in working with him. And it's one of the favorite things he likes to lecture his grandkids on now, is things related to money, as he gives his, rocking chair lectures.
Are they in fact lectures, or is there advice that comes along with it?
There's advice, but it's it's in the lecture format. You know, he's an old Italian man. It's like, let me just tell you how it is, and then when I'm done, you should nod and say, yes, I'll do all those things.
What was the first job that you had when you were a kid?
I bussed tables at a country club in our town. Well, actually, let me take that back. That was the second job. My first job, short-lived, was at a paper route. And it was a short-lived job because where we lived, it was not safe to bike. And so I got a paper route, but then I can't believe my parents agreed to this. They had to drive me to the houses. So they would get up and there was no way I would have agreed to do that. And it was terrible for me too, because there was no fun or independence in it. I'm in my parents' car and I got to get out and put the paper. It didn't last very long. And then the second job was I bussed tables in a country club in our town.
Also, Pittsburgh, pretty hilly town. Like a lot of hills. So
there would be no biking. No.
What did you learn bussing tables?
Well, really, I actually think bussing tables is like one of the greatest psychology lessons. I mean, you learn a lot about like service and being on a team and all that stuff, but you talk to like strangers all the time. And some of my like memorable interactions of thinking about like, why do people feel the way they feel and think the way they think? So one thing that happened while I was there, I was in high school, I applied to and was admitted to Dartmouth, which is where I went to undergrad. I was very excited about this. I was bussing tables, and because it's a country club, the members are somewhat routine. So there's fewer strangers than usual. And there was an older gentleman who came in and all the time. And somehow I knew he went to Dartmouth. I can't remember the moment that I learned that. But when I got in, I was really excited to tell him that I was admitted too. And I told him as I was bussing his table, and without missing a beat, he looked at me and said, that place has never been the same since they let women in. and I took it in stride. Like, hey, I'm here to do a job, to bus a table. What am I going to do? Like throw spaghetti in his face? And he's an older man. Like, it is what it is. His wife was mortified. And the next time they came in with this whole gift bag of Dartmouth stuff, including some old school vintage stuff that she had like bequested down to me, which was actually very, very cool. But like, I always remember that. I think like, I wasn't really offended by that, even though now as a women's advocate, I'm like, I get it. I can understand why she was mortified. I also wasn't offended. But just thinking about like, why people come to believe the things they believe and feel the way they feel. And the psychologist in me, even though it was long before I ever did it, was just curious about like, I wonder what his life was like or his experience was like or why he felt that way. And there was a lot of those kinds of moments interacting with the public that I got out of bussing tables.
Let's go to Dartmouth then. Do I have this right? You got a degree in mathematics and economics?
That's right.
What attracted you to those topics?
So it's twofold. One was I was a math kid and I really liked math, and it was what I knew and I was good at and I enjoyed it. But the other thing was back to my dad's voice in my ear, which was college is not a luxury to go and like have the best 4 years of your life or find yourself. My dad, I grew up in Pittsburgh because my dad, who was raised in the like rural West Virginia, went to Carnegie Mellon. And he tells the story about he had enough money to pay for the first semester and that was it. And he had to earn a scholarship. Otherwise he was going to not be able to stay. So for him, college was like you buckle down and this is a massive investment in your future and that needs to all pay off for you. Now I get there, I have a lot more privilege. My dad is now paying for me to go to school, but I still had this mentality of this is not a time to kind of mess around. So my dad had made his career in business. He tells me this is the way to go. This is how you get money, is you get a career in business. So I say, sure, Dad. And so economics was my attempt. Dartmouth is a liberal arts institution. There is no undergraduate business school. So that was my businessy element that I was bringing in. I also found it really interesting. And so that's how I did it. And I loved both of those things. I don't regret them, but I did not explore a lot in the ways that I think my kids will hopefully feel the luxury to say, you know what, you could take a class in something you've never heard of, and it actually might be the passion you never knew you had because you just haven't been exposed to it yet. So it took me some time to figure out. I actually didn't really want a career in traditional business. I didn't want to work for someone else, nor did I want to be an entrepreneur in the way my dad was. But I didn't figure any of that out till later.
So armed with your degrees from Dartmouth College, what do you end up doing right when you graduate?
I worked for McKinsey, which I did that. I always joke, it was pre-internet, internet the way we now know it. Everything was done on paper, right? You wanted a job, people would come to campus and they would recruit you and you would make physical copies of your resume. So I always say for $10 and 100 copies of your resume, you could have all the investment banking and consulting interviews you wanted. Those were plentiful. I did not know what I wanted to do. And so I went with the path of least resistance in business, which was consulting and banking or hiring people in bigger numbers. And so they would come to you. You didn't have to really tell a story and go to them. And I had banking offers and consulting offers. And I took consulting because it seemed like it was going to be a relatively better lifestyle and that it would give me more exposure to different industries and figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, when it came to business. And I was there all of 10 minutes when I realized I certainly didn't want to be a management consultant. And I wasn't sure I wanted any of the jobs that any of the people that I ever saw in all my consulting work were doing. And it led to what I call my quarter life crisis. For the first time in my life, I didn't have a thing ahead of me that I was working toward and what was I going to do. And it was in that I found psychology. I was so desperate to get out of my work as a consultant. Even though this was a job that many people would have loved to have, I realized it wasn't for me. So I went to Barnes & Noble when there was, physical bookstores were still how you got all your books. I went to the careers section. I bought a careers in psychology book and I flipped through it to figure out, I really like psychology. How could I make a career out of it? Even though I had taken all of 2 psychology courses by that point. And I stumbled on a chapter in the book called organizational psychology. And I looked at it for 2 reasons. One, they said that it was about combining business and psychology. So that felt like a story I could sell. Like, hey, I'd had this path that looked businessy, even though I was still really young. And the second thing I noticed in that chapter was they said of all of the psychologists, the organizational psychologists make the most money. And that went back to that idea of ding, ding, I have to earn money, ding. And therefore, that was like how that path took off. And I started looking at, well, how do I pursue organizational psychology? And that led me to my now career. But it came from being unhappy in my job. And so now having decades of students that I've taught myself, I always say the best job is one you love. And the second best job is actually one you hate. Because when you're so unhappy, it really motivates you to become self-aware. It motivates you to problem solve, to network, to do all the things to get yourself out. And I see a lot of people exist in the in-between. They don't love it, but they don't despise it. And there's the part where I think a lot of people get stuck. So I was actually kind of grateful I disliked my consulting time as much as I did because it really forced me to take a chance and do something else.
So you have this epiphany. This is the category of psychologists that make the most money. And yet, at any point did you think, or did your father or anyone else sort of at least warn you that the path that you would end up going on is not, it's not a short journey and it's not an inexpensive one? To go to Stanford and get your PhD, that takes time and that takes money.
Yeah. So no one said anything. I do, to my dad's credit, he believes in me and has been my biggest cheerleader all along. And although he had opinions and those opinions stuck, he wasn't that heavy-handed with them. So I knew what he valued and therefore I wanted to be pleasing, but he wasn't saying, if I had told him I wanted to be an art history major, he would have said, go ahead. I mean, he wasn't telling me what to do. So but I do know that when I said I was going to quit my business job and I was going to go to graduate school, I think, and it was going to be 5 years long at least, I do think he probably had an internal moment of panic. Fortunately, I went to a program that was funded. So it did cost me because I went 5 years without earning an income, but I didn't have to pay tuition either. And when my dad heard that, all of a sudden this became a better idea. But all that said, my parents were quiet about it. They were going to allow me to do what I was doing. But no, I didn't have anyone to advise me because as successful as my parents were, given they came from having absolutely no money, they didn't know about these kinds of things. I mean, like a PhD was so different than anything they had done or to think about. They weren't able to say, hey, call my friend so-and-so, he's a PhD or she's a PhD, she'll tell you. So I just had to figure it out on my own. And in some ways, I'm glad I did, because now when people call me and they ask me and I tell them the pros and the cons, there's a part of me that feels a little bit like I'm giving them a realistic job preview, but am I just killing their dreams? And should I just let them dream and go into it and figure it out all on their own? I can't not tell them what I think when they ask me, but there was no one telling me that. And so, no, I went in thinking this was just going to be the greatest thing. And generally it was, but I didn't have to go into debt doing it. So that's one very positive thing.
Yes. And I'll say, not that your parents need defending, but organizational psychology, that's one of those things that just begs for more questions. Like, you tell someone you're getting a degree in psychology, they probably know what that means. Organizational psychology, your parents and most people are like, wait, what does that mean? What do you do with that? And how does that work?
I think they had all of those things. And I think, I had been successful enough and dedicated enough as a student and as a kid. I think they felt like it's probably fine, or who are we to say? So they didn't give me a hard time. They are much, I think it's also the generation, like they were a lot less heavy-handed with me than I am with my 3 kids in terms of what they should be doing.
Before you and your husband got married, how much did the two of you talk about money?
Not enough. We talked neither about money nor parenting. I think the 2 things that probably cause the most amount of fights in marriages, right? And thankfully, my husband and I get along very well. And we ended up being fairly aligned on these things, both things. But we didn't talk about money a ton. I met him, he was getting his MBA when I was getting my PhD, and we didn't really discuss it. So we coexist fairly well together because I'm a very opinionated person and he's a very easygoing person. And there's those memes on Instagram where every couple has like the one person who spends like there's no tomorrow and the other person, is clipping coupons or whatever it is. I'm the spendy one. So I'm the spender. He's the saver. He's also in finance. And I joke that if I had married another version of me, we'd be bankrupt. And if he had married another version of him, he would still be living on the futon he had when I met him as a 25-year-old graduate student. So we complement each other, I think, well in that regard, and have been able to kind of rely on our corresponding strengths. Well, given we never talked about it.
I don't want to get overly personal, but
do it.
The way you started to answer that question made me think that at some point early in your relationship, when it was clear that the two of you were becoming serious about one another, there might have been an incident around money, or maybe not a fight, but I am curious if early in your relationship, there was some sort, the joke I always make about when people move in together, when couples move in together, the first week or two is, even if they've been dating a long time, that first week or two, there are several instances of one person saying to the other, "Oh, is that where you store that? Oh, well, I store it in another room, but no, we could store it there, and it's like you have that about stuff that you store in the kitchen, in the linen closet, all that sort of thing. And I'm curious if you had the financial version of that, where it's like, oh, wait, you think we should be doing this with our money?
So not a fight. And the reason is because I'm a feisty Italian and my husband is the most easygoing, passive person. So I always joke that in our relationship, 99% of the fights have been started by me, maybe 100. And his response to them is always the same. Every time I'm mad, his response is always some version of, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That must be really frustrating for you." And you cannot continue to yell at someone who responds that way, even if they're 100% in the wrong. But I will tell you 2 memories about money that are related to our relationship. Okay. So the first one is that in addition to I was talking a lot about my dad, but in addition to like my dad growing up without money, my parents are also divorced. And as were a lot of people in my town when I was growing up, my mom had always worked. And when my parents got divorced and things got kind of weird around money, my mom felt somewhat protected, even though she was not totally happy about how money was being split. She felt somewhat protected because she had always worked and she had always then had her own money. And she would compare it to her friends who had not worked for pay. And when they got divorced, these friends she felt were like completely penniless, destitute, didn't know which way was up. And so that also colored my thoughts about being a woman with money. And so things like we bought our first house together when we moved to North Carolina before we were married. But I we were not yet married. And so in my mind is thinking like marriages don't necessarily last forever. So when we bought our first house, I said, I'm putting this house in my name. And then when we get married, it will default to being marital property. But I'm not going to put a house in a name with somebody else that I'm not married to, because I've seen this movie before. Like I've seen all these women in my town who felt like they were married forever and then they weren't. So my parents being divorced and my mom feeling like she ended up okay with money because of her choices was something that was always there. So he didn't fight me on that. And he was like, he's a finance guy. So he's like, yeah, it sounds like it makes some good financial sense. And then we got married. So that's one. The second one, though, is that because he's a saver, there are various points, we have 3 kids and that feels hard at times, and working as a mom, as a parent, and having kids. And I've had lots of friends who have stepped out of the workforce, and I wasn't sure that was what I wanted to do, but I talked to a lot of friends who said, my husband like either doesn't care if I work or actively doesn't want me to work. And I was like, wow, the psychologist, what is going on in the brains of those husbands? Because I did not get one of those. My husband is like, I work. Why wouldn't you work? Like people work. Like why should, like everyone works. And so that hasn't been really a fight because it's aligned well enough with what I want to do, but it has sometimes been a source of like, tension, but sometimes I wonder what it would be like if I had a husband who had a different philosophy around money and particularly my need to earn it. Because he definitely does not have the mentality of like, oh, whatever you want to do is fine by me, honey. He's just like, that doesn't work. No, like we all, like, I don't get to quit my job. You don't get to quit your job. So it's less tense now because my kids are between the ages of 10 and 16. But when they were little and working just felt so profoundly hard, there was part of me that would wish, oh, why didn't I get one of those husbands that said, honey, if you want to stay home, it's fine. And even if I didn't, I think it would have felt like it relieved a lot of pressure that I had to constantly be working when I was a parent of young kids.
Since I got a little personal with Alison, I'm going to get a little personal with you. How are things going in your kitchen? Come on, be honest. You're in a rut. You're in a little bit of a rut. No judgment. No judgment. We have all been there. Looking at that plain bowl of rice, looking at that routine sandwich that you always make, and wishing it had just a little something extra. That's where Marmar comes in. Marmar is not just another hot sauce. It is a chili garlic condiment that balances a perfect savory crunch with a little bit of heat that actually has the personality and flavor to transform your food. It's made with high-quality ingredients that bring out the best in whatever you're eating, whether you're mixing it into some late-night pasta, topping it off your morning eggs, dipping in a grilled cheese sandwich, anything you're making, it's going to make it better. But I will warn you, once you have that first taste of Marmar, plain food is not going to cut it anymore. Go to ilovemarmar.com, use the promo code MONEY, and get 10% off. That's ilovemarmar.com, promo code MONEY. I just opened up a new jar 2 days ago because I put it on everything. Try Marmar. Your taste buds will thank you. All right, let's get back to Alison. Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing that you have bought that makes you happy?
Well, not a single thing, but I do get a lot of joy out of a good, solid designer handbag purchase. Unfortunately, my husband would tell you, wouldn't it be nice if it was 1 instead of 12? But spender and saver.
For special occasions or just sort of impulse? You see one like, that looks good, it's time to buy.
Both. And I'm a believer that if you own something nice, you, 1, take very good care of it and you keep it nice. And 2, you use it. Like the day you use it is the special occasion.
Have you ever made a purchase at any point in your adult life that you regret, and sometimes you find yourself still thinking about it?
Not a ton, but I have one, which is my current car. My philosophy on cars is you buy them and you drive them till the wheels fall off. So I'm age 50. I've only owned 2 cars prior to this. This is my 3rd car. This could take me to retirement, but I regret it. It's a Porsche Cayenne SUV. I had wanted this car for so long when I couldn't afford it. I finally got to the point I could afford it. I was debating between a few cars. I'm like, you've wanted this since you were in your 20s, Alison, you should buy it. And darn it, I don't know if they all are terrible or if mine's just a lemon, but there's so many complaints I have about that car. And my husband says, just get rid of it. And back to the thing, even though I'm a spender, that's one area that dumping a depreciated asset to go buy a brand new version seems so dumb. So I just drive it and complain about it all the time.
If it is any solace, you are not the first guest on this show to basically tell that story about buying a car that was coveted and once purchased, immediately hated. And I'm just out of spite, I'm just going to drive this thing into the ground.
I know. I sometimes wish someone might steal it or something, and then I could have a good reason to get another one.
You just happen to leave the keys in and the windows down, and what are you going to do? Crime happens. What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself, not for your husband or your kids or anyone else? And was it a handbag?
Technically, it could have been a handbag, but the splurges that stand out to me lately in life is travel. Now that I've gotten my kids to an age where actually being gone is less of a burden on the family, I started to do things to invest in me. So I turned 50 in October, and the present I told everyone I wanted to give myself was I wanted to go hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. So I've splurged on it in that I've paid the bill, but I have not yet gone. I am going in May for a 10-day round total trip with 3 friends. None of them I am related to.
Have you splurged on quality footwear?
Oh, of course.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Because I haven't hiked that, but it sounds like you're going to need quality footwear. What is something about money that you wish you knew earlier in life?
The concept of a philanthropic priority. So my parents, even though they managed to do quite well for themselves through working, I think because they grew up with so little, they don't donate a lot of money. And I think they probably could have, but they didn't have that mentality. They weren't raised with it. And I wasn't either. And then I got to the point where I was fortunate enough where people would ask you for money and you'd give this and you'd give that and you'd give to your alma mater. And I was just throwing nickels around, someone's riding a bike ride, someone's doing this. And then I end up sitting on a board of a center at Dartmouth, and we talk about, soliciting donations to the foundation. And one of the chair of the board talks about the idea that if you're on the board, we want this foundation to be one of your top 3 philanthropic priorities. And when he said that, it was this huge light bulb to me of this idea of what it would mean to even have a philanthropic priority, to say, I want to take my discretionary money and I want to support this and not that. And that was really behavior changing for me, because then it started to make me think about, where do I want my donations to go? And instead of giving $50 to every friend's charity, should I start saying no to these things so I could start actually putting more money in places that I cared about? And then to have a conversation with my husband about that, of, do we have shared philanthropic priorities? But I feel like that's like a luxury of growing up with wealth. And so I didn't come from that family line of thinking about that. And I was probably in my late 30s by the time I heard him say that, and it kind of flipped a switch for me.
That flows very nicely into the next question, which is, what is a charitable cause that you like to support?
Yeah, so I really care about education. Not surprisingly, I'm a professional educator. So I tend to support things that relate to education in some way, shape, or form, whether they are our own, educational institutions that were, I think, my husband, I would say, is one of the smartest people I know. And I've been so shaped and privileged by the places I've gotten to go. So that's one. And then anything else that does have a goal of creating educational opportunities for people who are traditionally systemically marginalized is something that I get really excited about.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
No. And that's mainly because I consume very little media relative to people. And so when I think of my favorite things right now that are at the top of my head, I really like Only Murders in the Building and things like that they're not money related. I tried to watch Billions because it starred the guy, in addition to Paul Giamatti, it starred the guy who had just been in the Claire Danes one. Damian
Lewis.
Yes. Right? He's amazing. So I'm coming out of that. What was the Claire Danes series called?
Homeland.
Okay. So I was obsessed with Homeland. Then he comes out and goes to Billions, plus Paul Giamatti, who I would happily watch read the phone book. And I wanted to watch it. And there's a psychologist in it, right? They have that business psychologist. Everything about it, and I couldn't do it. That's the one I want to be able to say is my favorite, but I didn't watch it past like the first
one or two episodes, and you're like, no, this isn't working.
Okay, can I ask you though, if I'm going to watch something that has money at the center, do you have something to recommend to me?
I know you're a sports fan, so if you have not seen the movie Moneyball, it is highly entertaining. I mean, obviously the book is great, but there's that. I mean, I sympathize with you on the whole thing with Billions, because something that's come up a bunch of times on this show is a number of people talk about the series Succession. And I had that experience where I watched 2 episodes and I just thought, boy, I hate all of these people and I don't want to spend any more time with them. But I feel like I need to give it another shot. I forget who it was. Someone told me, you have to watch Succession like it's a comedy. Don't think of it as a drama. Think of it as a comedy. So I at some point I'm gonna give it another shot with that different mindset.
Totally. Oh, but you know what I will say is it has money at the center, and this is a favorite. Squid Game.
I haven't watched that just because it just seems so dark. But yes, obviously money is at the center of that. Is it as dark and violent as I imagine it is?
100%, and I loved it. I loved it. So it is not the kind of thing that I would do. One of my sons wanted to watch it, and I'm like, no. Like, I can't. First of all, you can't watch this unsupervised. And then I started to watch it, and I'm like, oh, this is really good. And actually, we watched it as a family. We'll just call that a questionable parenting maneuver. But everyone could not wait. And there were, I think, 3 seasons, and now apparently they're going to do some type of pivot to doing a U.S. spinoff or something like that. I don't know if that's true, but I did like it. I really did. As for someone who normally watches only Murders in the Building, like it got me. But it is 100%. It is gory. It is, death for days. Yeah.
Last thing is a penny for your thoughts. And this is just any advice you want to give people who are listening. And it doesn't have to be about money. It can be advice about any topic, any sort of wisdom you've picked up along the way.
Okay. Yes. And it's not about money. But what I would say, and then I'll explain it, is be an evangelical talker-upper of the great work that people are doing around you. And I say, if people took nothing else from like anything I ever talk about, most of what I talk about when I'm not talking about money is I talk about how people can influence more effectively, how they can get more power, how they can be more respected, like thinking about those psychological variables. And so many, these are fundamental human needs, things everybody wants. And that's why money is so tied into this, because money is a source of power, money is a source of status. But one of the best ways to actually, most strategic things we can do is actually the most giving, is the world runs on reciprocity. So whatever people do for us, we do in exchange. So if you go to lunch with a friend and the friend pays, you mentally will say, I need to remember that so that I pay for the next time, right? Because I don't want to be a taker. I want this to be in balance. When we talk up other people, it's such a beautiful way to live, to be able to shout out people who are doing great work. But one of the things it's really strategic, because it's reciprocity. When people hear that when you hear that people were saying nice things about you when you weren't around, your brain is going to naturally look for opportunities to return the favor. And so one of the ways that we can actually invest in our own status and power and success is to start investing in other people's first. And I think the world needs more of that. But it's also something that's really controllable that is also personally really, really beneficial.
There you go. Alison Fragale's book, Likeable Badass, is available wherever you get your books. It is a national bestseller for a reason, people. So check it out. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.